And also, I loved all of his gospel songs too. And meeting him was, at that point, high thrill.
In the shadowy corners of Greenwich Village, coffee houses lurked a young wanderer with a voice like gravel.
May your heart always be joyful, and your song
and dreams as vast as the American highway. Bob Dylan, the poet laureate who transformed folk music into electric revolution, wasn't just a songwriter who gave us classics like Blowin' in the Wind and Like a Rolling Stone. He was also a musical sponge who absorbed influences from every corner of American music history.
Is write the songs and sing them, and perform them. That's what I do.
Welcome to another episode of Offstage Tales, where today we're uncovering the musical DNA behind Bob Dylan's genius, the 6 bands that shaped the voice of a generation. The Minnesota-born troubadour who won the Nobel Prize for Literature was famous for his mysterious interviews and cryptic answers.
Philosophy and organic farming and things,
What did you know about organic farming?
Nothing.
But over the decades, he's dropped enough clues about his musical heroes to paint a fascinating picture. "I learned everything from somebody else," Dylan told Rolling Stone in 2004. You can't really learn to write songs sitting in some university. You learn by listening to records and imitating what you hear. And the artists he chose to imitate reveal everything about how a small-town kid became a cultural icon. From mountain bluegrass to British invasion rock, Dylan's influences span genres and generations. Some shaped his early folk years, others pushed him into electric experimentation, but all of them left fingerprints on the songs that changed music forever. 6. The Stanley Brothers, coming in at number 6 on our countdown, is a name that might surprise you, the Stanley Brothers.
They not funny, and you not the
Yes, the bluegrass legends from Virginia reportedly captured young Dylan's imagination long before he ever picked up an electric guitar.
They just reached a lot of people, with their exuberance and their attitude.
Dylan discovered Carter and Ralph Stanley's music in the late 1950s while diving deep into American folk traditions. According to music historian Greil Marcus, Dylan once said, "Carter Stanley's voice was like hearing an ancient bell that had been ringing in the mountains for 1,000 years." What drew Dylan to the Stanley Brothers wasn't just their harmonies, but their connection to something deeper. Authentic American storytelling that came straight from the hollers and coal mines. While other teenagers were listening to pop radio, Dylan was studying the Stanley Brothers' raw emotion and mountain soul. The Stanley Brothers were carrying the real thing, Dylan told an interviewer in 1997. They weren't performing music, they were living it. This authenticity became a cornerstone of Dylan's own approach to songwriting. You can hear the Stanley Brothers' influence throughout Dylan's early work, especially in songs like Man of Constant Sorrow from his debut album. Their high, lonesome sound taught Dylan that music could be both ancient and immediate, traditional yet revolutionary. The Stanley Brothers showed Dylan that the deepest American music came from the margins, not the mainstream. Carter Stanley's haunting lead vocals and Ralph's driving banjo created a template for emotional honesty that Dylan would carry into folk, rock, and beyond. For a young songwriter learning his craft, they represented everything music could be: timeless, truthful, and transformative. 5. Hank Williams. At number 5, we have the hillbilly Shakespeare himself, Hank Williams. This influence runs so deep that Dylan has called Williams the master of the universe and credits him with teaching the fundamentals of American songwriting.
I need a major change.
Dylan discovered Hank Williams during his teenage years in Hibbing, Minnesota, listening to late-night radio broadcasts from the Grand Ole Opry. According to Dylan's memoir, Chronicles, hearing "I'm so lonesome I could cry" was like getting struck by lightning. Suddenly he understood what songs could do. What captivated Dylan wasn't just Williams' voice, but his ability to turn personal pain into universal truth. While other country singers were playing it safe, Williams was bleeding on vinyl, turning heartbreak into 3-minute masterpieces that cut straight to the bone. Hank Williams was the first person to make me realize that songs could be literature, Dylan told Rolling Stone in 1969. He wasn't just singing, he was confessing. You can hear Williams's influence throughout Dylan's catalog, from the narrative storytelling in Tangled Up in Blue to the raw emotion of Blood on the Tracks. Williams taught Dylan that the best songs come from the darkest places, that authenticity requires vulnerability. Williams showed Dylan that country music wasn't just about fiddles and steel guitars, it was about truth-telling. Hank's tortured genius proved that real songwriters don't just entertain, they excavate the human condition and serve it up with a melody that haunts you forever. 4. The Everly Brothers. At number 4, we have the Everly Brothers, the harmony duo from Kentucky who bridged country and rock in ways that blew Dylan's mind.
The good times we had before you went away.
Don and Phil Everly weren't just singers, they were architects of a sound that would influence everyone from the Beatles to Simon and Garfunkel. Dylan discovered the Everly Brothers in the late 1950s when their hit Bye Bye Love dominated the airwaves. According to music journalist Robert Shelton, Dylan was mesmerized by their seamless blend of country storytelling and rock and roll energy.
He was the epitome of country music. He was the living ultimate end, and also
What fascinated Dylan about the Everlys was their brotherly chemistry, two voices that became one without losing their individual character. Their harmonies were so tight they seemed telepathic, creating a sound that was both intimate and expansive. The Everly Brothers had that brotherly sound that nobody else could touch, Dylan told Rolling Stone in 1978. When they sang together, it was like hearing one person with two souls. You can trace the Everly Brothers' influence through Dylan's electric period, especially in songs like I Want You and Just Like a Woman. Their ability to make complex emotions sound effortless taught Dylan that sophistication doesn't require pretension. The Everlys also showed Dylan how to modernize traditional sounds without losing their essence. They took Appalachian harmonies and dressed them up for the rock and roll generation, creating a blueprint that Dylan would follow throughout his career. For Dylan, the Everly Brothers proved that innovation comes from synthesis, taking the old and making it new, honoring tradition while pushing boundaries forward. 3. Buddy Holly. At number 3, we have Buddy Holly, the bespectacled genius from Texas, who showed Dylan that rock and roll could be both rebellious and intellectual.
Oh, my love, all of my kissing, you don't know what you've been missing over.
Holly wasn't just a performer, he was a songwriter, producer, and innovator who did everything himself. Dylan discovered Buddy Holly in 1959, just months before Holly's tragic death in that infamous plane crash. According to Dylan's autobiography, seeing Holly perform live in Duluth was a life-changing moment that shifted his entire musical perspective. What captivated Dylan about Holly was his independence. Here was a guy who wrote his own songs, played his own instruments, and controlled his own sound. While other rock stars relied on teams of writers and producers, Holly was a one-man creative force. Buddy Holly was the first one to show me the way, Dylan told the Los Angeles Times in 1997. He made it look possible for someone like me to actually do this. Holly's influence appears throughout Dylan's career, from his early rock experiments to his later Americana albums. Songs like Subterranean Homesick Blues echo Holly's rhythmic wordplay, while Dylan's DIY recording approach mirrors Holly's studio innovations. Most importantly, Holly taught Dylan that rock and roll didn't have to be dumb. His songs were clever without being pretentious, catchy without being shallow, a combination that became Dylan's signature style. Buddy Holly proved to Dylan that authenticity and intelligence could coexist in popular music, paving the way for everything that followed in his revolutionary career. For 2. The Band. At number 2 we have The Band, the group of Canadian and American musicians who became Dylan's most important creative partnership.
I bet on one horse to win, and she bet on another to.
What started as a backing band evolved into a musical brotherhood that changed the course of rock history. Dylan first met the band in 1965 when they were still called the Hawks, backing rockabilly legend Ronnie Hawkins.
Ronnie Hawkins, now, he looked like a shit kicker, but he spoke with the wisdom of a sage.
According to guitarist Robbie Robertson, Dylan was looking for musicians who could match his intensity during his controversial transition to electric music. What made the band special wasn't just their musicianship, it was their chemistry. These weren't hired guns playing Dylan's songs, they were collaborators who understood his vision and pushed it further. Their rootsy Americana sound gave Dylan's electric experiments a timeless quality. "They were the best band I ever worked with," Dylan told Rolling Stone in 1978. "They could play anything and make it sound like it belonged in some backwoods barn." The partnership reached its peak during the legendary Basement Tapes sessions in 1967. Holed up in a house in Woodstock, Dylan and the band created a new kind of American music, relaxed, playful, and deeply rooted in folk traditions. The band taught Dylan that collaboration could enhance rather than compromise his artistic vision. Their influence appears on masterpieces like Blood on the Tracks and Desire, where Dylan's storytelling merged with their intuitive musicianship. Together, they proved that rock music could be both revolutionary and traditional, creating a template that countless artists still follow today. 1. The Beatles. At number 1, we have the Beatles, the Fab Four from Liverpool, who pushed Dylan into his most revolutionary period and sparked a musical arms race that changed everything. John, Paul, George, and Ringo weren't just contemporaries, they were Dylan's greatest creative challenge and inspiration.
He was one of them.
He was our idol.
Bob was our hero.
Not an idol, but we just heard his record.
Dylan first heard the Beatles in 1964 when "I Wanna Hold Your Hand" exploded across America. According to journalist Al Aronowitz, Dylan was initially dismissive, calling them bubblegum music, but something about their energy and innovation kept drawing him back. What changed Dylan's mind was realizing the Beatles were evolving at lightning speed. Each album showed new sophistication, new experiments, new boundaries being broken. They were doing what Dylan thought only he could do, constantly reinventing themselves. They were doing things nobody was doing, Dylan told Rolling Stone in 2007. They weren't just following the rules, they were writing new ones every time they stepped into the studio. The mutual influence became legendary. Dylan introduced the Beatles to deeper lyrical possibilities, while they showed him the power of studio experimentation and electric arrangements. Rubber Soul pushed Dylan toward Blonde on Blonde, while Like a Rolling Stone inspired the Beatles to write Norwegian Wood. Their famous meetings in 1964 and 1965 created a creative feedback loop that revolutionized popular music. The Beatles taught Dylan that being popular didn't mean selling out. It meant reaching more people with your vision and changing the world one song at a time. So there you have it, the 6 bands that shaped Bob Dylan's legendary sound. Which influence surprised you most? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more music history deep dives.